If you look at your system that you've arrived at over practice,
Yeah,
talking with growers, studying, is the backbone of your system at Soilsmith balancing soils?
absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
that's it. Yeah.
Can you, for people that might not get that, what does define a balanced soil? What does that mean?
That means that all of the minerals plants rely on, the primary ones, it's about 18 of them, they are all in equal balance and in the quantity that should be in that soil. They're not equal amounts. Calcium, for example, and as the cation exchange capacity of the soil changes, then the quantity of nutrients in it also changes. So if you've got a soil with a CEC of, say, 15, the amount of calcium that should be in that soil, exchangeable calcium, might be in the order of 25 or 2,800 kilograms per hectare.
And for people listening, is a 15 CEC, is that high or low?
It's in Australian conditions, it's medium to high.
Okay.
Depends where you are. Yeah, I've got clients in some areas that have CECs of 55 and 65, really rich soils. And in some areas, particularly Western Australia, which is typically very sandy soil, the CEC might only be 3. So the lower the CEC, the lower the cost to balance the soil because it can't hold much nutrient. It just means you've got to do it more frequently. The richer the soil, the greater the cost. So in a CEC of about 15, you might have 25 or whatever it is, 2,800 kilograms a hectare of calcium. There might only need to be 2 kilograms of boron, but they've both got to be at their level. Because if they're not, those are a couple of extremes. If they're not, then you've got an imbalance. Nitrogen might need to be at about 30 or 40 parts per million. That 25 to 2,800, that's not kilograms a hectare, that's parts per million exchangeable, sorry. And, phosphorus might be 40. They've all got to be at that level. So each one's got to be tuned up separately to bring it into balance.
And is that balance dependent upon what's being grown and the physical makeup of that soil itself?
No,
Neither or no to both?
all plants have a very similar requirement as far as balance go, except if you've got woody plants like vines, an orchard, etc., then potassium needs to be quite a bit higher.
So if you
Um,
took a market farm,
yep,
veggie farmer in California here where I'm at, a
yep,
soil test in Maine, one in New
yep.
Zealand, one in Australia, would you balance those all about the same?
Exactly the same.
Okay.
The soil's the same the world over. The whole planet's made of the same mineral base. They might vary in the rock, the parent rock the soil was made from, but the way that the fertility in that soil, once it becomes topsoil, the way that behaves is the same the world over. I treat them all the same, and the response from plants is the same. I've got clients in pretty much every continent on the planet. Now, people just email me their soil test, and I'll write a report and send it back to them. Their response is the same, regardless of the soil type.
Okay.
So
So,
the
so
the only difference I make is the crop. The only different applications I make is the crop. So if it's an orchard or a woody plant, vines, etc., then the only real difference there is I increase the potassium.
So the key really, what your value add, what you do for people is they get a soil test. One, most people probably don't know how to read it effectively. You help them translate it
Yeah,
and you say, all right, let's get this thing in balance. And by restoring balance, I like the quote you said, balance is more important than quantity. So it's more important about getting all those nutrients where they need to be than just
yep,
dumping on a bunch of stuff.
exactly. People say, "Oh, I've got a low pH. My soil needs lime." It may not. You got to have a look at the soil test and see what's causing the pH to be what it is. You might have calcium at the right level, but magnesium is really low and potassium is low, then you're going to have a low pH. It doesn't need lime, it needs potassium and magnesium, or it might even need sodium. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium are the main drivers of soil pH and also for soil porosity. So they drive the physics as well.
Can you give an example of, I'll assume a lot of veggie growers listening to this. Can you give an example of results somebody might see from an unbalanced soil? And I get there could be many things unbalanced, but let's just say a common unbalanced scenario. What are results people would see in the field in terms of their plants, visuals? Is there keys to know something's off?
Yeah. The key thing is the leaf. Look at the leaves. The leaves will tell you if the plant's got a problem. I typically tell my clients, veggie growers, if you've got a problem with the plant, take a photograph of the plant and send it to me, and because the plant will tell me what's wrong. And then I can look at their soil test and ask them what they've done, because obviously they haven't followed accurately the guide. And then we can then develop from those photographs what's missing and fix it up rapidly with a foliar, and at the same time start repairing whatever it is wrong with the soil. Key things I find: magnesium deficiency, and that's often caused by excessive magnesium in the soil. When calcium goes down, magnesium goes up, typically. Not always, but typically. So if you've got low calcium, you've probably got high magnesium. And once magnesium gets beyond a base saturation of 20%, then it starts becoming unavailable to the plant. And I've seen some horticulturalists with magnesium at 45%, and the plants are never going to get enough magnesium. And immediately they send photos, and sure enough, it's a mag deficiency. Yeah, nitrogen deficiency shows up as yellowing of the oldest leaves. Phosphorus shows up in the purple color, potassium, burnt edges, and a crimson color in them. So you can see this in the plant once you get used to it. You can jump on the internet and just do a search for plant leaves showing mineral deficiency. And there's a heap of photographs of what they look like, and people can do this, and you can get charts showing how each mineral shows up in the plant leaf. And after a while, you can practice and get pretty good at it, and you can know what's missing. The thing of getting in your head to understand about when you see a deficiency in a plant, the plant will tell you, okay, let's say this got yellowing older leaves. The plant's saying, hey, I haven't got enough nitrogen. It isn't telling you how much to put on though. It's only telling you that it's a problem, but it can't quantify it. You got to do a soil test or a leaf analysis to understand how much to put on. But to rectify it, a foliar of nitrogen only has to be a low application, because you're feeding the plant directly, not the soil. That foliars are the cheapest way to apply nutrition to plants, but they have to be done regularly. One of the questions I often get is that when you go down this road of fertilizer, the narrative is once you start using it, you've got to keep doing it every year, and every year you need more. And that's completely incorrect. My clients, typically, they might start with a high amount of fertilizer if their soil's out of balance, but every year it requires less and less. And typically within 3 years, they don't mind require much at all. I've had one grower that started with a heavy clay soil and had some serious mineral imbalances. We fixed it up because this woman followed what I said to the letter. The following year, in just 12 months, it needed no fertilizer at all. Because it was heavy clay, it held lots of nutrients, so it had a big bank account of nutrients. The following year, her profit went through the roof because it no longer required fertilizer. That was a big cost reduction, and may not need any for several years, depending on how much is extracted. So when your soil's properly in balance, if you want to keep it that way, you have to know what the rate of mineralization is for your area. That's determined by year-round soil moisture and the state of the soil. If you extract more than is being mineralized, then you're going to deplete nutrients in your soil. So the easy way to tell what the rate of mineralization is to look at soil carbon, the total carbon in your soil. And from that, you can calculate the biological release of nitrogen and it'll work for other nutrients as well. And that'll tell you, if you know how much nitrogen is in the plants you're exporting, then you know what your limit is.
Mm.
And the formula is 1% carbon holds 1,200 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, which is released at between 2 and 5% per year based on year-round moisture. And for horticulture, I work on 4% because it's irrigated. It's going to be regularly good. And at 5% organic carbon, you don't need to apply any nitrogen. And it'll be the same. If your soil's balanced, it'll be the same for everything else. Then you have to calculate how much plant material you can export from that soil based on how much nitrogen that plant material contains. And you can get it to a level that you don't have to put any inputs in. And providing that level of productivity is profitable, then you can sustain your current rate of production. If you're carrying debt, etc., you might need to bump up your production, then you're going to have to support it with inputs. And I've done quite a lot of field trials on fertilizer use, growing crops. We were growing oats in a pasture cropping sense, and that means we weren't spraying out existing pasture. We were drilling in autumn, drilling oats into a perennial pasture that had been grazed down and then mowed down very low to take the competition out. Growing oats, and I did it with 3 other agronomists. We did it on my farm here. We financed it to learn, and their brief was they could use any fertilizer they liked. I tested each plot each year and sent them the test, and they gave me the recipe of fertilizer, and we put it on all 4 plots, each to their own. I did one. And at the end of the year, we'd test again. And I also did leaf analysis to look at the quality of what was growing. Every plot was very profitable every year, regardless of how expensive the fertilizer was. They were all profitable. And I calculated the return on the investment by putting it into hay and the cost of producing the hay, fertilizer, seed, physically making the hay, and then valuing that at the market price for bulk like semi-trailer loads of hay. The return on investment was several 100%. The lowest was about 150% in any one year. So it was very financially beneficial to use the fertilizer. And I was testing the soil annually, and we could see what was happening to the soil as far as its quality was going, changes in CEC, changes in organic carbon, etc. And I work with quite a few farmers who are getting into carbon trading, and large-scale farmers who want to cash in on the increasing soil carbon. And I've been doing trials here in cropping, and I've found if you want to increase carbon in your soil through a cropping enterprise, oats is king, because of its photosynthetic capacity and photosynthetic rate, and both of which are linked to soil fertility or plant nutrition. And I can increase carbon in soil multiple times faster than people doing intensive grazing or multi-species cropping. I can do it just by growing oats and fertilizing it correctly. In one 8-week period, my soil carbon increased by 0.4%. That's statistically significant. Like the rate of carbon increase in the soil in that growth period was just under 100 kilograms per hectare of carbon per day. Massive drawdown of carbon into the soil. That was done with fertilizer. I can't do it without fertilizer.